I want to commit to something like that because I want to live a life like that. I want to live a life that's all in. So my book, really, it's such a beautiful thing to realize. Like, I hope that I have contributed in the best way that I can to this conversation about how to make your life really worth living.
Hi there, Gracious Gang. It's Mike Creavey, host of the Gracious Guest Show, the show you're watching right now on the Gracious Guest YouTube channel. Delighted that you've stopped by here today. If you're new to this whole experience, please make sure you stop everything right now and just smash that subscribe button. I mean, crush that thing. Does anyone say that anymore? Anyway, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you back. We have a lot of great content here. The intersection of faith and culture. We're doing a lot of author interviews lately as well, which is what we're doing today with my friend, I'm happy to say, Stacey Sumereau, who has written this great text here from Ave Maria Press. It's called Adventure Awaits. You can kind of see that there. Adventure Awaits, How to Interpret Your Desires and Hear God's Voice. Which gets into all kinds of very wonderful themes of discernment, prayer, spiritual life, a little bit of spiritual warfare as well. Some discussions too, in some cases, of a little bit of mystical prayer even. And Stacey also shares a good deal about her own journey, autobiographical kind of sketch to some degree throughout the book. And you see, it's not a very huge text. It's very easy to get through, but I found it very, very easy to sort of pace myself going through it and taking my time, really digesting each chapter and drawing a lot of great insight from it. So without further ado, I want to jump into the interview with Stacey about this wonderful text. Here's her background. Stacey's unique journey spans performing in Broadway national tours on The Wizard of Oz and Beauty and the Beast, to discerning religious life on reality TV in The Sisterhood, Becoming Nuns, which she talks about a little bit. It was a Lifetime show in 2014. All the way to marriage and motherhood. Stacey founded and hosted the Be Not Afraid conference and the God's Adventure Awaits Summit, serving over 20,000 people in 2020. She's a certified Catholic mindset coach and hosts the popular Called and Caffeinated podcast and YouTube show, both of which I highly recommend, and I've got them linked below with various other links as well. In 2020, Stacey wrote and taught the True North Discernment course to people in 13 countries around the world. She has contributed to the Ascension Presents YouTube channel and has written for National Catholic Register, Vocations and Prayer Magazine, and Life News. Stacey is the author of Adventure Awaits, How to Interpret Your Desires and Hear God's Voice with Ave Maria Press. She's presented at the National Catholic Youth Conference, the LA Religious Education Congress, and dioceses across the country, encouraging young people to know their worth and to embrace God's adventure. She and her husband, John, are raising their 5 children aged 8 and under in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and that's where she connected with me just a few moments ago. And so I do want to give you a heads up. We had a couple little tech glitches, so a couple minutes in, we had to switch gears to a different platform, so that's why you see a little change in the overall look. So without further ado, here is my conversation with my friend Stacey Sumereau about her book, Adventure Awaits. Check it out. All right, I'm excited here because this normally, Stacey, you are the host, right, of Called and Caffeinated. Now you get to be on the Gracious Guest Show and get to be guest. So welcome again.
Thank you, Mike. I am so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. You are indeed a gracious host.
Well, I try to be. And this is so fun because I don't know if I told you the backstory here, because I got just a couple different, connections here over the last year or so with some of these wonderful Catholic publishers, which, I didn't even know how to ask about something like that. It just started to happen. And they're like, would you like a copy of this book to read and interview and I'm like, that sounds really awesome. Yeah. So I did 1 or 2 of those, and then some other, publishers would reach out, and I don't know how out of nowhere, Ave Maria Press, is like, we have this book by this young, inspiring author named Stacey Sumereau. Would you like? And I'm like, yes, please.
Yay!
And it was, you know what it was? It was like Elf. It was like, I literally did the whole, I know her. I know her.
Santa Claus.
Like with the whole Santa thing. So yeah. I know
the
him.
fact that you equated me to Santa Claus makes me feel honored. Thank you. I love that.
Well, and it's fun because we do have, of course, we have an additional gracious guest, your newborn son. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about
Yeah.
yourself and kind of where you're at these days, and give
Thanks.
those who aren't familiar with you a little bit of background.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the host of the Called and Caffeinated podcast. I'm currently on, we were just talking off camera about having a sabbatical. So life is teaching me how to be a mother of 5 children. I am taking some maternity leave. I actually did, for the first time ever, I intentionally said to myself, I'm not doing anything with ministry this summer. And that was the first time I've taken a summer off and given myself the offloaded the mental load of I should be doing episodes of my show. I should keep producing things. Prior to that, I wasn't producing much and I was feeling stressed about it. So taking time off over the summer for my third trimester was actually really relaxing. But normally, in normal times, I'm a speaker. I'm about to get back into speaking. I'm really excited. I am nursing my 3-week-old baby, my 5th baby Gabriel. And so God has been really good to our family. We live in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Way back backstory is that I started my speaking ministry and podcasting because I was on a television show called The Sisterhood Becoming Nuns in 2014. So I'm one of the 5 women in the world who can say that they were on a reality show about becoming a nun. So that's my claim to fame. It was on the Lifetime TV network. You can binge watch me crying about my life choices on the streaming platform of your choice. So that was me in 2014 before I discerned out of religious life. And I had so many people who saw the show come to me and say, how did you know what God's will is? How did God speak to you? How do you hear his voice? How do you know his calls? And that made me realize that there is a huge lack of formation in our church. I know I'm like, it's like, duh, but nobody knew how to discern. No one knew what God's voice sounded like. Not no one. No one who came to me knew that, and neither did I. So I started my podcast as really an observer, a learner, as opposed to an expert. I was not an expert, but I wanted to have conversations with people who were way smarter than I am. Like yourself, actually. You were one of my first guests, weren't you?
Oh, don't sell yourself short.
Well, I've learned a lot.
There you go.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'm just going to laugh because I wanted to go back. I don't know. It would probably take too long, but I wanted to go and check that because, I don't remember. It was like really early on.
It was really early.
I'm on your website.
You were maybe my 5th or 7th guest or something.
Something like that. The reason I'm laughing is... Oh, Stacey, is it possible it was the first one, or does that just go back to where it cuts off on the RSS feed or something? Because
I think it might have been my husband who was the first. Maybe it was you, though.
Okay, it should have been.
We have to go back.
You
can leave a link in the show notes.
Is discernment. The title. This is what's ironic, and the only reason it made me think of it. The title is "Discernment is a Roadmap for Life." And here's the funny thing: we did that show in 2018. It says, and full disclosure here, and I'm so excited to talk to you about your book here. Full disclosure that, it's, there we are having a conversation about some of these same themes, and it's like how much has changed in your life, how many ups and downs, and even the joys, the consolations, desolations, trauma, global things. We're recording this in September 2025, and we've just been through I can't process these terrible recent events in the news and everything, and it's so right off the bat, maybe just pitch this to you, because I didn't want to just go straight autobiographical in terms of what to talk to you about, for 2 reasons. 1, we don't have enough time to do that justice, and 2, I want people to get this book, which covers some of the highlights, But I guess just what I wanted to maybe ask you about is, I don't know, thematically, we can go anywhere you want with this. What would you say about, maybe right up front, the importance of, always being aware and being careful not to fall into the trap that just because you've had a good experience of discernment in the past and thought you got great insights and thought you knew how discernment works, to not fall for this trap that it's always going to be like that and always, be filled with consolation and clarity.
I love that. Actually, this relates so perfectly to things I've been thinking about in the last week. And I'm so glad we had our interview coming up at this time, because we are 5 days out from Charlie Kirk's assassination. He was assassinated last
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday. We're recording on the Monday following his assassination. So many people are talking about this, and it's such a wake-up call for so many people, myself included. The night that he died and in the
Amen.
following nights since, I have not been able to sleep because I realized in my very honest heart of hearts that while I'm not a lazy person, there are things that I haven't been doing that are God's will for me, things I haven't been saying, especially in interpersonal relationships and then in my public witness and my public ministry, things that I have been trying to um, hide or say in a way that will make everybody like me. And I'm realizing that even though
Right.
I discerned my
Yeah.
vocation 9 years ago at this point, or 10 years ago, I committed to marrying my husband, and I said yes to our engagement 10 years ago. And that was such a process that felt like, okay, now I have my vocation. Now I know what I'm doing with my life. Discernment never ends. Discernment is never, ever going to end. And even this very week of my life, I'm not a lazy person. I have 5 children. I have 3 in diapers. 1 has a disability, and I have a newborn. And my oldest is 8. So I am doing a lot of things. And yet at the same time, Charlie Kirk's death showed me the ways in which I'm not being courageous, that God is calling me to be courageous. And I'm processing that. And I am excited to discern new calls. And there's something, this is a little bit of a side note, but I think what people are seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm seeing a lot of people like wake up to is this realization that a life well lived, where you left it all on the playing field, you committed, you proclaimed truth, you proclaimed the gospel, you did what Jesus commanded, you did the hard things, you lived a life that left a legacy behind you, a legacy of goodness and truth. People are waking up to the attractiveness of that. And, as I just kind of realized in the middle of the night as I was ruminating on all this, that this is why our church, our Catholic Church, and the Christian religion has so many martyrs. We have people who are willing to stand up, because when you see somebody else living like that, you're like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want my life to be. I want to leave it all on the playing field. Right. And that ties in so beautifully to my book, because the reason I wrote this book is because I don't want people to waste their time. I want people to have the courage to give their life to the Lord. And I'm hoping through my story to be a bridge from wherever you are now to the place of courage that God wants you to be. And the way I'm doing that is by showing you step by step. I was so fearful of giving my life to God. I didn't want to give my life to God. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I wanted to go to church on Sundays and give God Sundays and not the other days of the week. So I didn't want to give my life to the Lord, but as he started inviting me in, what I found was that the more I gave my life to him and the more I actually tried to find my own desires, this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but the closer I got to figuring out what my own desires are, the closer I was to actually figuring out God's will for me. Not the fluffy desires, not the easy, feel good, happy all the time desires, but the deep desires. And ultimately, that means giving ourselves away. And again, going back to the example of Charlie Kirk, he gave himself away, right? He gave himself so fully to his work, to his family, to God. And I think a lot of people are seeing that and saying that commitment, I want to commit to something like that because I want to live a life like that. I want to live a life that's all in. So my book, really, it's such a beautiful thing to realize. Like, I hope that I have contributed in the best way that I can to this conversation about how to make your life really worth living.
We're reconnecting here. We had a little bit of a glitch, but just I want to pick up where we just were, and just mention to you, I love these journal prompts, and I was just saying to you before we had our little, the devil tried to intervene there, because we're talking about courage, and he doesn't want that. But I love how these journal prompts just felt like very organic to me, and felt like they belonged, and they were really helpful. Like I you know better than me, I'm sure the reading does not flow the way it used to, when you could just sit whenever you wanted with a book and read for hours. I don't know how anyone, who has more than 0 kids does any reading. But so for me, this fit nicely with, I was reading it kind of like chapter at a time over several weeks, which, for those of you that are like, want to laugh at me because it took me weeks to read it's not a huge book, but I mean, it made me actually really digest it, I think, Stacey, in like a Like I wasn't rushing it, you know?
Thank you.
And and
Yes,
I love
yes,
like
yes. I'm so glad to
yeah,
hear
I just
that.
love the ability to process it, you know, and to really kind of chew on it. So that's one recommendation I would just have for the
Yeah.
reader. Don't feel like you have to blast through it either. Like really, you know, engage with
Yeah.
like your story in here, but also these connections that they can take to their real life. So maybe do you want to just share a little bit
Yeah,
about
I mean,
how you envision that maybe, or if you've been hearing anything from anyone who's you know said had a similar sort of experience.
mm, yeah, I think that, I mean, the lessons I'm sharing in the book took me years to learn. And so while I hope to distill them in such a way that everyone can pick them up very quickly, they are meant to be, there's levels that they can sink in. You know, there's levels of understanding that you sink in another layer and then another layer and then another layer. And I think with all of my favorite books, I go back and I feel like I get something new out of them every time I read them. So I'm hoping that this book will be one that people can come back to and exactly like you said, to digest, right? Because my
Hmm.
story takes place over the course of the reality TV show, but starting way before that, which is really when the beginnings of my spiritual journey started, you know, learning to read scripture. You know, that just was the beginning of hearing God speak to me. And, you know, I really truly hope that everybody who reads the book will listen more intently for God's voice. Because what I found was that so many Catholics, and this is when you ask for people's experiences, what I found is that when I'm speaking to a room full of Catholics, I like to do a little that's not exactly thought experiment, survey. I like to take a little
Mm.
survey and I'll just ask them, like, how has God spoken to you? And I understand that that's a really big question. I understand that's kind of like, you know, people get a little overwhelmed by that question. But what I find very consistently is that a lot of people have actually never, not only have they not recognized God's voice in their life, but they've never really thought that God actually wants to speak to them. And that to
Yeah.
me, on the one hand, I get it because that's what I thought for like 2/3 of my life until I actually started listening for the Lord's voice. But then now that I have started listening for the Lord's voice, I'm like, how do you not? How do you call yourself a Christian and not think that God wants to communicate with you? You know, is God sending us all a direct line every moment? No, absolutely not. But there are many ways that he wants to communicate with us. He has a love language. My spiritual director loves to say this, and I think it's beautiful. God is a love language with you that's all your own. And it's
Wow.
not going to be the same as anybody else's. And
Hmm.
the more I think about that and digest that, the more, um, I mean, it's powerfully true. So if we're walking through our entire lives calling ourselves believers of Christ and yet acting like a dog that just follows behind its master and never even dares to look up at its master's face, while in reality, we're smaller, we're tiny we're infinitesimal compared to the greatness of the Lord. But at the same time, He's called us His children. He doesn't want us to just follow behind Him thinking that we never are, like he's kind of angry at us, like we never deserve to see his face. We do because he says we do. And that to me has totally changed my relationship with the Lord. So each chapter focuses on a different way that God might want to speak to you, whether that's something very direct like a vision, which I've experienced myself
That was
multiple
powerful.
times.
Yep. You've told me that story before, but
Thank you.
reading it again, yeah,
Yeah.
that was just it never ceases
Yeah.
to amaze me.
Yeah, and there's that one vision which was the first one that I had, but then there have been so many since, and some of them have not been quite as life altering and foundational as that first one, um, just because they speak more to little specific moments rather than this grand sort of like I'm going to change your entire life around and make your
Yeah.
heart want me more than anything else. So not all of them are as foundationally like a paradigm shift as that first one was. However, they're all so extraordinary, and they're all, to touch the divine is like it's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
It's literally sublime. So the Lord might want to speak to you in that very direct way. And it's hard to say how many people that he wants to speak to that way. But if you would ask me at age 12 or 15 or 20 if the Lord wanted to send me a vision, I would have been like, yeah, that sounds nice, but I'm not Teresa of Avila. I'm not
Hmm.
John of the Cross. I'm not a great saint. But the Lord spoke to me not because I was a saint, but because I was in sin and I needed to turn to him. So,
Right.
don't ever say like the Lord isn't going to speak to me this way. So some of those ways that I propose the Lord might want to speak to you are more extraordinary, and some are very ordinary and super accessible for every Christian. For example, reading scripture. That's kind of like the number one way that I started to get to know the Lord and understand, like, what is his tone of voice? What has he promised me? What does his providence mean for me, like in a real substantial way? How am I supposed to actually live and make choices based on his promises to be with me? And you have to read scripture. You have to read his word to really start to live with faith. And so, I tried to give kind of a whole range of different ways the Lord can speak. So yeah, I'm
Well,
so glad, Mike, that you found that helpful. I'm so glad.
well, and I'm sure a lot of people will. And just to kind of riff off that a little bit, and then I've got a hard, like a curveball for you. Uh, Not
Okay.
exactly,
Okay. Love it.
I'm
Let's go.
genuinely, it just came up, and I'm interested in your response to it. But the first part
Love
was
it.
just that just today I was going over the end of a unit with my students. So I teach ninth grade for the most part, and it's intro to scripture primarily course, and like we follow the
Awesome.
narrative thread, sort of Jeff Cavins, Scott Hahn, John Bergsma kind of arrangement of taking through the narrative. And years
Love
ago at
it.
a retreat when I was at Catholic U, which you were as well, I went on a
Mm-hmm.
retreat to Ellicott City, Maryland. There was a
Okay.
Franciscan retreat center there, and
Mm.
I'm honestly not sure if the OFMs are still. I'm not sure if the campus ministry at Catholic U is still Franciscans or not. I don't know. It's been 20 plus years.
I don't know if they are.
I'm
Yeah,
not
I'm not
sure,
sure.
but
Mm-hmm.
that was the connection. So it was a Franciscan kind of retreat.
Okay.
I feel like I'm surrounded by all these Franciscans that I feel, you know, nowhere near, worthy to be in the presence of. But my whole life, like my patron saint is Saint Anthony. Padre Pio has featured prominently in my life. Francis, Saint Francis
Nice.
himself. Others. I'm wearing my Franciscan ring here on this one. The
Oh,
tau
love
ring.
it.
Anyway,
Love it.
at that retreat, the priest whose name I don't even remember. I met him like one time at this retreat. He gave a covenantal framework for the whole story of Scripture that I think goes so far beyond,
Mm.
and I'm sure he would agree, but that wasn't his point that day, into our very lives. And he called it the four C's.
Mm.
And I've seen different ways to do
Mm.
this. I think Scott Hahn does a sin, exile, redemption, like SER acronym, But the one
Okay.
this guy, this priest brought up was the four C's, which was covenant, complacency, compromise, catastrophe of
Mm.
going through that,
Mm.
over and over again, in the Bible, there's some sort of covenant, there's some sort of God moment where there's a family formed or a family deepened. There's this moment of grace, this moment of calling, this moment of vocation, all that. And it goes on for a while. And then the sinful human being, because it's never God's fault and he doesn't go anywhere. Another saint I heard said, if you feel like God,
Yeah.
you're far away from God, who moved? So he didn't
So
go
true.
anywhere. But that we,
So
we get
true.
we get we get complacent, and when you get complacent,
Mm.
you compromise, whether it's exercise or your diet or whatever, right?
Totally.
And
Totally.
it always leads to catastrophe. But he never gloats over you, and like a good coach or like a good
Mm.
father, right? Good mother will lift you back up. And so
Mm.
that's just something that I thought of when you were saying that
Mm.
idea of that with discernment, because it's true for the story of Scripture. It's true in our story, that
Mm.
we as long as we're in the land of choosing, you know there's good choices and there's bad ones, and
Yeah.
we can't.
Well, and
Yeah, we'll be
yeah,
miserable if we
something.
forget that, I feel like, right?
Yes.
Deluded.
Yes. So, and I think this is great that you bring this up, Mike, because a lot of times what I've seen in kind of modern day Catholic young adult culture is that sometimes we um, equate choice. How do I say this? Sometimes we think that we're sinning when we're not, or we equate our vocation with I have to choose the right vocation or the wrong vocation, and
Hmm.
one is the right one and the other one is sin if I don't figure out some magic
Right.
puzzle in the sky that the Lord
Uh-huh.
wants me to decode. So if I'm called to be a priest but I get buried instead, heaven is lost to me forever. That's probably like a very extreme example, and I hope nobody actually thinks that. But what the real sin is, right, is not allowing God into your story, into your decision making. That's really where the sin
Hmm.
lies, is if you're choosing, because we don't discern sin, right? Like there's no discernment there. It's like, oh, of course, you choose virtue, you don't choose sin. But
Right.
any discernment we do is between two good things. So I just wanted to throw that out there too, because sometimes we can start to think, oh, I've missed my vocation. And I encountered a lot of people who thought this when I was discerning religious life. They're like, I got married 20 years ago. I have 4 children, but I think that maybe I was called to be a nun. Did I miss my vocation? And I was like, well, maybe that would have been more ideal for you at the time when you were choosing. But at the same time, the Lord doesn't forsake you. You chose a good thing. You've committed
and
to
you
it.
also
You're
can't
sticking with it.
surprise him.
No,
Like
absolutely
he's there
not.
waiting, like,
Yes.
dang it. Why did
Dang
oh
it.
man, now what am I gonna do? Like that's Jesus
I
has
know.
never said, now what am I gonna do? I've said that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Petty, like what
Yes.
now what? Well, like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
and he will
mystery.
continue. Yes, he's going to continue weaving the tapestry of your life. And if a thread goes somewhere that, maybe wasn't the most ideal thing, then he's going to keep working with it. And we get
Yeah.
so wrapped up. I did this a ton. We get so wrapped up around, why doesn't God tell me what he wants me to do? And so many times the answer is because he wants you to choose. He's given you free will, and he actually
Yeah.
trusts you a lot more than you want to trust yourself.
Did you mention that quote in your book? I don't remember off the top of my head. I love that Augustine quote, which sometimes can get
Yeah.
misused, but the whole like love and do what you will,
Oh
you
yes,
know.
that was a chapter heading. Yes, yes, that
Yeah, I
was
thought so.
the
Yeah,
at
because
the
that's
beginning of
just
one of the chapters. Yeah, because if
yeah.
you love the Lord, and we have examples of great saints, very great saints, like Saint Camillus de Lellis, founder of the
Uh-huh.
Red Cross. He tried to
Yeah.
join a religious order like 3 times, and they kept being like, "Dude, get out of here! Like you are not called here." And he's like, "No, no, guys, this is where I'm supposed to be." And they're like, "Get out!" And then he left finally for the 3rd time and founded the Red Cross. So
Yeah.
clearly, like the saints didn't even always discern their paths correctly. But what Camillus de Lellis did was, with every rejection, he kept trusting the Lord. He kept doing
Yeah.
what he thought was right, and he got there eventually. The Lord was like, he was I'm sure that he had gained so much through that persistence, through that learning to trust, the Lord, through all of these turns that didn't go the way he planned, right? And this order he thought he was supposed to join. But the real test, the real sin would have been if he just said, okay, well, the Lord's not making this clear, so I'm just going to give up
Mm.
on this, Yeah. So
I don't know if
anyway,
I've
that was
ever
just a little bit of a side note.
well, and, like, and to be careful what you pray for. Like I don't know if I ever told you this because
Yeah.
I haven't thought of it in a long time, to be honest with you, because I tuck it away. Um, occasionally I'll remember in the vim and vigor of my sort of reversion wouldn't quite be the accurate word, but like my kind of faith
Okay.
deepening in college, in the midst of those holy days of candles and confession 3 times a
Yes.
day. I At one point I was like 21 or 22 probably, and I literally prayed and I meant it. And there have like sometimes I'm like, I'm sorry I prayed that. Please stop answering that prayer. I told Jesus I wanted to be for the rest of my life. It was something to the effect of like a thoroughly Eucharistic man, which sounds great. And then I said something like, make me bread for others. And
Oh yeah.
there have
Rookie
been times
move. It's like
there
it's
have
like
been
praying for
yeah.
patience.
There have been times when he's like, well, this is what you asked me. Let me show you what that means.
Oh,
And all I can think, so I'll read things like sometimes where I'll be like,
yeah.
I'll read that famous passage where in their sincerity, right? John and James, like let us,
Hmm.
or well, their mother, right? Let my
I
son
was
sit on
literally
your right
reading
and
that
left.
passage
Is that right?
today. Yes.
No way. Yeah, that
Yes,
just
yes.
popped in my head.
I
And I
literally
love.
read, dude, I read that today. That's so
Well, there you
funny.
go.
So
It's
funny,
meant to
Mike.
be. It's meant to
Yeah.
be. Hopefully,
Yeah.
you'll lose your internet again now that we made that connection, right? No, darn it.
I know. I
No,
know.
no. But
What
but
spiritual
I
insight is
love
about to come out?
exactly. Well, I love the insight that it's not so much like sometimes you get the impression, and it does say that like the other disciples were mad when they hear about that. Like who do these guys think they are?
Mm.
But I like to focus on the. I think the takeaway from that of is that Luke? I forget. Was it Luke's gospel? I'm not sure I think it's in a couple synoptics, but the point is there's at least one synoptic where it specifically mentions that Salome, that she's at the crucifixion. Like they mention her by name, probably
Mm.
Luke, because he mentions
Mhm.
more women. But the point seeming
Okay.
to be maybe, or one point being, she gets to see with her own eyes what it means to be on his right and left when he enters his kingdom. And the idea of like the
Yeah.
thieves on the cross kind of thing,
Yes.
when that request
Yes.
is made, it's made with good intentions, but you have no idea what you're asking. And so that might be like, would you say, for
Mm,
discernment for people too, that here we are in our sincerity.
mm,
Oh God, give me a husband, give me a wife, give me this, give me that. Like that, I think you
mm.
mentioned this. Sorry, making a huge question here. You mentioned, I had the reference and I
It's
lost
okay.
it, but I this
It's
beautiful passage I highlighted. It's in chapter the Just Do It chapter, where you talk about, like, go to your room, light a
mm.
candle. There's chant, what do you want from my life? A voice booms, I want you to do such and such. Oh, you can marry so and so. That was one of the biggest realizations when I was in seminary, when I felt peace with the idea of leaving.
Mm.
Because what hit me was, I was looking for an
Yeah.
answer, and what finally occurred to me was, if the Blessed Mother showed up and told me herself, you are called to marriage, it's not like there's like a woman waiting outside on the steps of the seminary that I'm gonna run out the door like,
Yes.
honey, it's us. Like, I have no idea what that path even looks like. And sure enough, like, and I
Yeah.
feel everything in me tells me I made the right decision, but I didn't even meet my wife till years
Mm.
after I left the seminary. So it
Yeah.
always, everything takes
Yeah.
faith and trust, and it's his story. You're just part of it,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. And to just clarify about the passage that you were referencing, what that passage was talking about was like our desire for a simple, uh, it's like answer that is so discernible and clear that there couldn't possibly be a wrong,
Nice.
anything
Yeah.
wrong about it. Like we want God to directly tell us. But what's so interesting, I think, is that so often God doesn't directly tell us that way. And it's because he wants us to exercise the gift of our free will, which is the gift that makes us image him, right? That's what makes us look like the Lord, right? And makes us his children, is this gift of free will, a gift of choosing. And so he wants us to exercise that free will. And what I think is so interesting is that when the Lord has spoken to me, it's not about, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, because he doesn't think of me as his slave. He says to me, do you know how much I love you? He doesn't
Mm.
tell me what to do. He tells me about our relationship, because that's what heaven is. That's really when time ceases to exist and there's no to-do list. It's all relationship. It's heaven is this permanent um, being with God, right? It's not a doing. And so, and me as a doer, as a person who is a very type A doing type of person, I have to really sit
Mm.
with that and remember that it's not about a checklist. It's not about I have to do all these things to get into heaven, but it's really this relationship, and that's how the Lord wants to speak to me. And then once you are secure in your relationship with Him, you can go out and make a wonderful choice.
Yeah.
You can go out and choose a great vocation. You can choose from a place of security, knowing that you're his child. So that's a huge message of the book. And as you were mentioning about them, wanting to sit on his right and his left and everything, I actually think that was a great request. Like obviously they didn't know what they were asking, but I love that tenacity. I love that desire, even if it was like
Yeah. Aim
so.
high,
It
right?
was so. Yes, I mean they were such rookies. They didn't know what they were asking. But going back to
Yeah.
what we were saying before about courage, and going back to what we were saying
Yeah.
before about leaving it all on the field, they did. Like at that time, they didn't know what they were requesting, but then they did give their lives for Christ. Like they
Yep.
they actually went out and drank the cup that he drank. So I think that, and if they hadn't had that request and they hadn't been honest about the fact that they wanted this thing, it's so easy to laugh at them. But at the same time, too, they actually did it. Like they grew into that request. I think that's so beautiful and admirable. And like that inspires me actually, because I'm like, I need to not judge those desires, those big desires. I need to let them have space and pray about them and bring them to the Lord. And the Lord's like chuckling with love because he's like, oh, you don't know what you're asking. But at the same time, he's going to fulfill it, because that
Yeah.
big desire, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier with courage, right? Is having that big desire and living the big life, living the big dream, giving yourself away, not being afraid to commit.
Right.
So anyway, that's
Yeah.
and now I'm getting excited about it. I'm like, oh, thanks for helping me make that connection, because I was praying with that
Yeah.
passage today and I wasn't like feeling particularly inspired about it, but now I am.
Well, I didn't think of it at all until it just came up. That's so amazing. Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah, it's
Stacey,
so great. I love it.
I'm so sorry that that we just can't invent more time. I'm afraid.
Yeah,
That's
isn't that a shame?
but it's well, and but you don't want to give away too much, of course. Too, we want people to get
True.
the book, and I've got all the links and stuff below. There it is. Adventure awaits. But yeah, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
and I'll definitely have you on again. We want to continue the
Oh,
conversation. There's so many great things to kind
that'd
of
be great.
unpack, and absolutely. Well, thank you so
Likewise.
much.
Likewise. And before we go,
Yeah.
this book is about exorcisms. I'll just say that so that the algorithm will pump it way up
Right.
high.
Yes. Spiritual
Because
warfare.
anything with spiritual
Yes.
warfare, yeah.
There's an
There's
actual
no
photo of the
exorcisms.
devil on page. Like, no, there's not. There's none of that.
Yeah.
No, it's just,
And my
just a
head was
wonderful
spinning
treasure
around
trove.
in chapter 6.
Oh man, that's gonna
Because we
drive you.
know
Yeah.
that, yeah,
There's the
yeah,
views.
just put exorcism in the title and yes, 100,000 million views. It'll be great. Oh
Well, thanks
man.
again
Yes.
so much. So good to see you.
You too, Mike. God bless you. Take care.
God bless. It's always such a delight to catch up with Stacey, and so much spiritual insight. I always feel very encouraged, and like she said too, we were talking about early on in the interview. At the time of this recording, there's all kinds of darkness all around us in national news, and in so many ways, maybe in our own families, our own suffering, our own trauma, and it's so easy to feel downtrodden and to lose sight of the broader narrative and the great indeed adventure that Christ is calling all of us to, and that we are all challenged sometimes to remember that Good Friday isn't the end of the story. The darkness isn't the end. The crown of thorns isn't the end, right? Necessary ingredients in the greater glory that is to come, which St. Paul tells us, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it even entered into our minds, our imagination, what God has in store for us. So God bless you all. Thank you for stopping by today. Share Stacey's book far and wide. Make sure you check it out and check out all of her great work. And until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.